Now, the federal government says more than 13 million social media accounts have been shut down for violating the code of practice on offensive content. While the accounts were removed from platforms such as TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. The federal government's action is backed by a Code of Practice 2024 compliance report submitted by promoters of interactive computer service platforms such as Google, Microsoft, and TikTok, among others. Well, for more clarification on the issue, the Executive Director of the Consumer Advocacy and Empowerment Foundation, CADEF, Professor Chiso Ndukwe-Okafor, joins me on the program. Well, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
First off, I want to get clarity on this. I mean, directly, who deactivated these accounts, the FG, because reading this information, some say FG, some say they are the big tech companies. So who directly deactivated these accounts?
Well, from the information we've gathered, it has to be the tech companies itself. They would have the access to be able to deactivate accounts based on stated guidelines or reports that they receive.
What do you then make of the deactivation of these accounts?
Well, there are several ways to look at this. It's very important that the compliance report has come out. It also shows that the different Nigerian regulators, NIDA, NCC, and NBC, are being taken serious by these foreign corporations. It's important for us to know that Nigeria is being taken serious, and they're trying to obey the rules and regulations that Nigeria has stipulated, demanding a compliance report. So it's a good thing in that sense. It's the report stated 59 million harmful contents removed, about 13 million accounts deactivated, but also over 400 issues and appeals resolved, and some were later reinstated. So it seems on the surface that there is a level of balance. But beyond this, we really have to have deeper questions of how it affects Nigerians. One of it is data protection and sovereignty. How is the data gathered amongst these several platforms? How secure is it? How is it being used? How is it stored? How is it processed? How is it shared? You know, data is big money. Data is the new gold, and data can be sold and make money. So are these big tech companies using our data without consent? So these are some of the issues as a consumer advocacy organization such as ours is concerned with. So, of course, it's a good thing, but we have to even look deeper and ask deeper questions.
Just like you said, you've raised some questions there, some issues. But let me treat, first of all, the issue that has to do with the NTDA, NBC, and NCC combining. Speak to this synergy between the three organizations, and going forward, how can they improve on this synergy for better and more conducive and unobtrusive digital environment? It's
understanding that in Nigeria we have a lot of agencies. Sometimes they seem to do similar things, and the regulation is siloed in the different agencies. So it's extremely important that they have a working synergy amongst the three. And from this report, it seems that they are. Going forward, what is important is that data should not be siloed. We have to be known as a country that values data, collects data, and preserves data, and that is easily accessible by the right parties. So the synergy that I currently see on the surface, they seem to be doing a great job together.
Fantastic. So what impact, if any, will this action have on the freedom of speech and expression?
Well, free speech and the civic space. Normally the line between moderating harmful content and legitimate speech is always very thin. We are guaranteed freedom of speech in our Constitution, but we have to understand that sometimes people don't even understand where freedom of speech begins and where a crime is being committed, either from a harmful content or things you accuse people of that are not true. So regulators need to guarantee that the code of practice is never weaponized against journalists, civic activists, or even political opposition. They cannot be weaponized. So that line between restricting legitimate speech and moderating harmful content has to be measured and monitored very strictly, using the law to support their actions.
Now that you've talked about knowledge, that's talking about literacy, I'd like to ask you how this will enhance digital literacy and promote trust and transparency in Nigeria's digital ecosystem.
Well, one thing is for sure. When there's a lot of B2C businesses happening online today in Nigeria, and if people begin to see such a report, their compliance and that accounts are being activated, then it will increase the trust level of the average Nigerian and willingness to want to do business with people who are online. The important thing is that there has to be education. There's a lack of literacy and a lack of education going on. So people don't know what is right. For example, the last major action that happened in Ibom Air, people started posting pictures that by law they're not supposed to post. But a lot of people didn't know that this was that this is actually illegal to post what seems to be like a pornographic picture or a nude picture of a human being. So that where education and literacy and people understanding what the rules are and what their rights are. Responsibility
of this education, yeah, because it's very important. What you said now is very poignant. Because there was talk about, should I use the word punish those who posted those pictures online of that lady? So who takes the responsibility of educating the people, on what to do, what not to post, what their right is, and all that stuff?
The responsibility really rests on a combination of both the regulators, which is NIDA, NBC, NCC, all the regulators, as well as other civic organizations and NGOs. We can't leave education and literacy to the government only, but it has to be a collaboration of all the stakeholders. Because trust me, we are on the streets ourselves. And we know at CADEF, a lot of people don't know what the rules and regulations, what they can do and what they can't do. They think as long as it's on their camera, they have a right to post it, without understanding that they might be breaking the law or crossing a line, a very thin line between breaking the law and informing the general audience.
Indeed. It's quite interesting because you mentioned, I told you while you were speaking, you mentioned some things, the issues that raised here. The question of around 420,000, that's actually the figure, pieces of content were put back online after users appealed their removal. What does that signify to you?
Well, to me, what it signifies is that sometimes they might be a little bit arbitrary. The rules are not clear. I'll give you a typical example. A few months back, our organization experienced our platform being pulled down from Instagram. And so we appealed and wrote them. And they came back with we violated the rules. And we even sent in all our documentation to show who we are. And we never got any response. And so what it shows that, yes, they are taking action. But I've noticed from personal experience, they could be arbitrary and it's quite slow sometimes. So imagine 13 million accounts were closed, but only 400 appeals were resolved. So is it because all the 13 million was wrong? Or is it because the capacity they have to address these issues, they are not able to meet the demand? I don't know. But these are some of the questions that I hope the regulators should be asking these major stakeholders, platforms, on what is going on. And another thing is there's no local presence. I know everything is digital, but there's no local presence. Nigeria is a huge market on the digital platforms. And I think a dedicated service to countries where there's tremendous usage should be quite helpful. With the advent of AI, there is also ways of looking at these data sets and then figuring out how to handle appeals quickly and fairly.
Or, interestingly, I want to add a third one, that these people who their contents were put back knew their onions. They had knowledge of what to do. They knew that, what they posted was right, so they had to complain and then they had to put it back. That could be another reason.
Of course, it's certainly. A lot of times people don't even know where to complain, and when they complain, they don't know what the next steps are. That is very, very possible. The complaint platform, even though it looks simple, but it's actually quite complicated because some of the things they're demanding for you to produce is not easily available for them to produce. And even when they produce it, it's not acknowledged. So you don't even know whether they've received your complaint or addressed it, or they simply just shoot out an email and said sorry. So a lot of times people don't know what to do. I've heard complaints on Facebook that trying to complain on Facebook, it's a major issue consumers are complaining about. So yes, what you said is quite true.
Social media, both of us know, is a vital tool for communication and commerce. So many people are doing businesses on social media, TikTok, for example. But also poses risk ranging from misinformation, disinformation, and cyberbullying to online fraud and, of course, exploitation. How difficult is it to maintain a balance between these two?
It can be difficult. Like I said earlier, it is a thin line. And it is compounded when people don't understand what the rules and the regulations are, what their rights is, what they can do and not do. But do we need, having said that, do we need a safer internet? boost in internet in Nigeria? Yes, because once we know there's safety, it will boost the e-commerce platforms. It will boost innovation. So it is important that we know that it is okay for us to have regulations, but we have to be careful about over-regulation or political motivated takedowns to scare off investment. Because, I mean, doing that will scare off investments within the country and stifle innovation. So it is a thin line. People need to be educated. Even the school system has to be involved. People need to understand. Children are now having access to smartphones and on social media. They need to be educated, not only from a safety perspective, what they can do and cannot do, but also the dangers and the harms of social media.
Safety. So let's talk about that. Do you think that you talked about regulation and safety? I'll get to regulation, but let's talk about the question of safety. Do you think that this will foster a safer digital environment in Nigeria, and in what visible, identifiable ways?
Theoretically, of course, it will foster that until people understand. I wonder this report. First of all, I haven't seen the report. I heard the news, but I haven't read the report. Access to the report is extremely important because we need to look at the report to see how detailed is it. What research processes were used? What theoretical processes were used in generating the report? So one is to have access to the report, to read it and digest it, but how many consumers will do that? So yes, theoretically, it will boost innovation and e-commerce, but it also needs to be broken down to the general population so they understand, oh, okay, there is an opportunity for me to complain when somebody violates my rights, whether it's cyberbullying. A lot of cyberbullying is going on. People go into people's comments and make really nasty comments. They don't understand it's cyberbullying. People need to understand that cyberbullying is against the law. They need to understand that fraud, e-commerce fraud, is against the law. So backing this report up with also making sure that those that have been identified not just, I don't want to say arrested, but at least opportunities to give them a chance by law to prove what they did is right or wrong. Some level of persecution, especially the blatant ones, some level of persecution happens when you break these laws. But please, we have to remember, we can't afford to have witch hunting on these platforms, because once that happens, a safer internet that will boost innovation, that trust will be broken.
You talked about regulation. NITDA warns that protecting Nigerians from online harm requires more than regulatory enforcement. That probably takes us back also to the question of education. So you married it to what more is required aside regulatory enforcement, and are the people concerned doing enough of the education for people to know what is which and which is what?
I don't think we're doing enough. Notice I use the phrase "we are," because everybody is a stakeholder in this case, because everybody I know uses social media. So we're not doing enough. The regulators are not doing enough. The educational system is not doing enough. The civic CBO's arena, we're not doing enough. We need to educate. We're over 200 million Nigerians. I wonder what percentage of those Nigerians are aware of the rules and the regulations. How many of them are aware what the social media etiquette is? And so we need to start incorporating it into a curriculum from elementary schools, through the university level. If we can catch them early, then the education continues into adulthood. So we're not doing enough. That's the answer.
That's the answer, which means we have to buckle up. And talking about doing enough, this idea of we register one or two successes, we get carried away, sort of, it's all right. I mean, you have to pat yourself on the back for doing something good, and that encourages you. But does this signify that the tech companies registering in Nigeria, complying with local laws, meeting tax obligations, does this say that they are doing what they should be doing? In other words, should the NITDA, NBC rest on their oars, as it were?
When it comes to technology, you never rest on your laurels, because sin got here today, gone tomorrow. It requires that, yes, we give our regulators a huge pat on the back. But they can't rest on their laurels because there's more to do. We're expecting more from them in terms of awareness and advocacy. We're expecting more from them in terms of data privacy and safe data. We're expecting more from them that Nigeria needs to be a country known for having its own data. A lot of times, if you notice, we tend to do some cut and paste. What is happening in the West, we cut paste it. We have to make sure that whatever regulations we have, it is contextualized to the Nigerian people. We have to have our own context. We have to tell our own story. So we need to start collecting data. We need to have data repositories. A lot of our data right now is in silos. We need to have data repositories, whether it's in the social media space, in the medical space. Somebody called me today that they went to one of the teaching hospitals and they couldn't locate their files. For 3 hours, they were looking for their files. Why should a physical file, and this day and age of AI and technology, our files are still found in locations that you don't want to mention. There's a lot of technology out there, blockchain technology, so that we can make sure our data is secure. So there is more we have a long way to go. I do congratulate the regulators for what they have done so far, but we do have a long way to go.
Do have a long way to go. That is very important. How much a commitment does this demonstrate among these big tech companies towards ensuring a safer, secure, trustworthy online environment? How much of a commitment does this demonstrate?
I can't measure what their commitment level is, but one thing I know is they know Nigeria is a big market for them. So what they want to do is to make sure that whatever compliance that they'll give you that compliance level. Whether it's a surface pat on the back, let's do this and just get it done with, or whether it's a measured, dedicated compliance approach that they are using, I can't say. But historically, knowing that businesses in general always want to do just enough to survive. But we want to get to the place where businesses understand that just enough doesn't cut it anymore. You have to be invested in the community that you're doing business with. Because if the community does not exist, your business will not exist. So we've passed the era of just enough. And we're now in the era of immersive commitment of businesses in their communities. So I can't say what they're thinking, but one thing I know is just enough will not cut it anymore for Nigeria.
Enough will not cut it anymore for Nigeria, and there's a need for them to keep pushing so they can keep responding the way they have responded. But before I let you go, nearly 59 offensive posts. You've talked about this earlier on, quite poignant that you mentioned that case of the airport incident, but I'd just like you, nearly 59 offensive posts were taken down. Any examples you can give of such, any one or two more examples before we call it a day here on Prime Time, just for educative purposes,
So I'll give you, for example, accident happens on the highway. People take pictures of either people that are hurt or dead bodies, and they're showing it online. Can you imagine the trauma that an effect it will have on families when they see all these pictures online? Example is posting children that have been violated. You post their pictures online. There's no privacy. So such things, we're crossing the line. We have to understand that there are just certain things that you're not supposed to post online. Pornographic pictures. You're taking picture of maybe somebody doing something, whatever it is, and you can see the picture and you post it online. By law, you've just you've just broken the law. So you need to learn to hide the faces of the people. You need to learn to not cyberbully. There's a lot of cyberbullying going on online. You need to learn that when you're making comments on somebody's page, the way you speak to them, you can't bully them. Cyberbullying is a crime. You need to know that when you lie you're presenting a social media page that is false, and you're pretending to be somebody that you're not, that's also a crime. So these are some of the information that people are not aware. So awareness and education is extremely important. Extremely
important. We'll call it a day there. Executive Director of the Consumer Advocacy and Empowerment Foundation, CADEF, Professor Chiso Ndukwe-Okafor. Thank you so much for enlightening us this evening.